At our family Thanksgiving dinner, my father flipped a plate of scalding food into my lap while my mother slid a glossy folder across the table and announced that my dream wedding venue, the one I had spent 5 years saving for, had been officially transferred to my younger sister for her engagement celebration. My sister raised her champagne glass and toasted to first come, first served, while my fiance was ordered out of the house and called an outsider who had no say in family matters. They thought the booking was already stolen, the paperwork already done, and the matter already closed. They had absolutely no idea that the manager of that vineyard had been my fiance's college roommate for 4 years, that every phone call to that venue was recorded by company policy, and that the voice on those recordings pretending to be me was about to send my own mother to prison. Before I share the painful details of my story, I have a quick question for you. Where in the world are you watching this from right now, and what time is it over there? Drop it in the comments below. I absolutely love seeing where my global family is tuning in from. It gives me so much strength. Go ahead and type your city and your time right now, because what you are about to hear next will completely shock you. My name is Olivia. I am 29 years old. I work as an accountant in Portland, Oregon, and for my entire life, I have been the understudy in my own family. The starring role always belonged to my younger sister, Madison. Madison was the baby, the beauty, the pageant girl whose trophies filled the living room shelves while my honor roll certificates lived in a drawer. When Madison totaled her first car at 17, my parents bought her another one within a month. When I needed a graphing calculator for advanced math, my mother told me to borrow one, because money did not grow on trees. My father, Frank, a man whose love came with a scoreboard, made the rankings clear at every family gathering. Madison was the joy of the family. I was the responsible one, which in our house was not a compliment. It was a job description, and I performed that job for decades. I worked weekends at a grocery store from the age of 16. I put myself through college on scholarships and night shifts. I became an accountant, built a careful, quiet life, and somewhere along the way, I became the family wallet. When my parents fell behind on their phone bill, the family plan migrated onto my account, and it never left. When Madison wrecked her credit at 23, I started making the monthly payments on her car. Payments she promised to take over and never once did. I told myself that this was love. I told myself that one day they would see me. I had not yet learned that in some families, the more you give, the more invisible you become. There were 2 bright lights in my life, and I want you to remember both of them. The first was my grandmother, my Nana, the only relative who ever looked at me like I was the interesting one. The second was Nathan. I met Nathan 4 years ago at a charity race, a kind, steady project manager with laugh lines and absolutely no patience for cruelty. I need to be honest with you about something my family never let me forget. Nathan was not my first engagement. At 25, I had been engaged to another man who walked away 6 weeks before the wedding, and my family treated that heartbreak not as a wound, but as a punchline. For years afterward, my mother, Diane, would introduce me at parties as her daughter who almost got married. So when Nathan proposed to me last spring on a hilltop covered in wildflowers, I cried for an hour, not just because I loved him, because I finally believed I was going to get my day, and I knew exactly where that day would happen. Years earlier, I had attended a friend's wedding at a place called Silverleaf Estate, a vineyard spread across a hillside in the Willamette Valley, with rows of vines rolling down toward a stone terrace and an old oak barn strung with lights. I stood on that terrace at sunset, completely alone, and made a promise to myself that someday I would be married on that exact spot. From that night on, I saved. 5 years of skipped vacations, packed lunches, and a spreadsheet I updated every single payday. The full cost of the venue was $22,000. I paid the $12,000 deposit 18 months in advance to lock in the first Saturday of next June, and I cried in my car in the parking lot after signing because the responsible one, the understudy, the girl who almost got married, finally had a date, a man who adored her, and a hilltop with her name on it. I made one mistake. I was happy out loud. I posted photos from our tasting visit. I showed my Nana the brochure. And at a family dinner in early autumn, I made the fatal error of letting my mother and sister see how much that place meant to me. Because 3 weeks later, Madison got engaged. Her fiance was Grant Whitmore, the polite, soft-spoken heir to a family that owns half the car dealerships in our county, a family with money, standing, and a mother who expects perfection. And from the moment that ring hit Madison's finger, my venue stopped being my venue in my family's eyes. It became an asset. Madison toured Silverleaf the very next weekend and discovered what I already knew. The estate was booked solid for nearly 2 years. The only premium summer date available in their books was mine. The campaign began immediately. Madison called me, sugar sweet, explaining that the Whitmores were old-fashioned and expected a wedding within the year, and surely I could understand that her situation was simply more urgent than mine. When I said no, my mother called, and the sugar was gone. She told me that Madison was marrying into a family that mattered, that my wedding was just a party, but Madison's wedding was an opportunity, and that after my last engagement, the whole family agreed it was risky to waste a venue like that on me. Those were her words. Wasted on me. When I still said no, my father got on the phone and told me that a daughter who puts a piece of land above her own sister was no daughter of his. I hung up shaking, and Nathan held me on the couch and said the sentence I should have framed on the wall. He said, "They are not asking you, Olivia. They are softening you. Watch your back." I thought watching my back meant ignoring phone calls. I had no idea that 2 things had already happened behind my back. The first happened at the engagement dinner for Madison and Grant, the last family event I attended before Thanksgiving. My purse sat on the hallway table all evening, and at one point I noticed Madison near it, phone in hand, and thought nothing of it. The second thing I could not have seen at all. In my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, in a fireproof box my mother insisted on keeping for safekeeping, sat my old documents, my Social Security card, a copy of my birth certificate, my passport from college. My mother had been the keeper of my identity since I was a teenager, and I had never once thought to take it back. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my mother called Silverleaf Estate. She gave the coordinator my full name, my date of birth, my Social Security number, and the card number from a credit card statement that had been photographed in my purse at that engagement dinner. Speaking as me, in a warm and confident voice, she explained that due to a family decision, the June booking should be transferred into my sister Madison's name, and that the contact email and phone number on the account needed to be updated immediately. She authorized a transfer fee and a winter event deposit, $4,800, charged to my card, to reserve the estate's barn for Madison's grand engagement celebration in December. Every confirmation email from that moment on went to a brand new address my mother controlled. As far as I knew, my wedding was safe. In reality, on paper, it was already gone. Which brings us to Thanksgiving, my parents' dining room in Salem, 18 people around 2 pushed-together tables, my Nana to my left, Nathan to my right, Madison glowing at the head of the table beside her future mother-in-law, because yes, my mother had invited Grant's parents to Thanksgiving to show off the family. We had just finished the turkey when my mother stood up, tapped her glass with a spoon, and said she had a wonderful announcement that would finally put a certain family disagreement to rest. She walked around the table and slid a glossy folder in front of me like a prize. Inside was a printed confirmation from Silverleaf Estate, Madison's engagement celebration, December, the Oak Barn, and beneath it, a second page that made the room tilt. Booking transfer complete. The first Saturday of next June, reserved under the name Madison Whitmore. My $12,000 deposit, absorbed into my sister's wedding. I heard my own voice ask what she had done, and I barely recognized it. My mother smiled the way you smile at a slow child and explained that she had simply handled it, that the venue had been lovely on the phone, that everything was settled and paid, and that I would surely get some of my deposit back eventually, once Madison's events were finalized. Madison lifted her champagne and said, with a little laugh that I will hear for the rest of my life, that it was just first come, first served, and that technically her paperwork now came first. I stood up. I said that nobody at this table had the legal right to touch my booking, that impersonating me to a business was a crime, and that I was calling the venue right now, and that is when my father slammed his fist on the table, rose out of his chair, and bellowed that I would not ruin one more family celebration with my selfish drama. He grabbed my plate, still heaped with steaming food and gravy fresh from the stove, and flipped it into my lap. The scalding gravy soaked through my dress onto my thighs and splashed across my forearm, and when I cried out and tried to back away, he seized my wrist and wrenched me back toward my chair, shouting into my face that I would sit down, shut my mouth, and be happy for my sister for once in my miserable life. The room did nothing. 18 people, and the room did nothing. Grant's mother stared into her wine glass. Madison examined her manicure. My mother said, in a soothing voice, that everyone was tired and emotional. Only 2 people moved. My Nana, 81 years old, gripped my father's arm with both hands and told him to let go of that girl this instant. And Nathan stood up so fast his chair toppled backward, peeled my father's fingers off my wrist, and placed himself between us like a wall. My father turned purple and roared at him that this was family business, that Nathan was an outsider, that no man without our name had any say at this table, and that he could get out of this house. So, we got out. Nathan wrapped his coat around my burned legs and walked me to the car while my family returned to their pie. And in that car, in the dark, with my wrist already bruising and my skin blistering, something in me finally finished breaking. 29 years of being the understudy, the wallet, the girl who almost got married. I sobbed for exactly 5 minutes, and then I stopped, wiped my face, and heard myself say out loud, in a voice as flat and cold as a ledger, that every single person at that table was about to learn what the responsible one does when she finally stops being responsible for them. Nathan took my hand, and then he said the words that changed everything. He said, "Before we do anything else, I need to make one phone call. There is something about Silverleaf you do not know. The manager of that entire estate is Eric, my college roommate, the best man at our wedding, and every call that venue receives is recorded." Eric answered on the second ring, and what he told us, with rising horror in his voice, assembled the whole conspiracy in 15 minutes. Yes, a transfer had been processed 2 weeks earlier. Yes, the caller had verified my name, my date of birth, my social security number, and my card, but Eric admitted something had bothered him that day. The caller had stumbled on the simplest security question on file, the name of the street where I grew up, laughing it off as a senior moment before reciting it correctly on the second try. The voice had sounded older, and the caller had been strangely insistent about changing the email and phone number on the account before anything else. He had flagged the call in the system as unusual, but the verification data checked out, so the transfer went through. Then he asked me one question. "Olivia," he said, "what street did you grow up on?" I answered instantly, and then I answered the 3 backup questions he had never even gotten to ask the caller, and I heard him exhale like a man who had just watched a car crash in slow motion. He said, "That was not you on that call. We record everything. Do not contact your family. Go to urgent care tonight, photograph everything, and call the police in the morning." We did exactly that. in exactly that order. The urgent care doctor documented second-degree burns across my forearm and thigh and deep finger-shaped bruising around my wrist, and she wrote every detail into my chart in the neutral, devastating language of medicine. The next morning, the day after Thanksgiving, while my family slept off their turkey, Nathan and I sat in a police station, and I filed reports for identity theft, criminal impersonation, and credit card fraud. Then I called my bank's fraud department, and that call turned a fire into an inferno. Because the $4,800 venue charge was not alone. There was a second charge, pending that very morning, to a bridal florist, and a third inquiry from a catering company, all routed through my card. My mother had not borrowed my identity for one phone call. She had adopted it as the official funding source for my sister's entire wedding. What followed was the quietest, most methodical 2 weeks of my life. The detective assigned to my case subpoenaed the recordings from Silverleaf, and the voice on them, warm, confident, performing my name, was unmistakably my mother. The venue's email records showed the new contact address, and when investigators traced it, they found it had been created on my parents' home internet connection on the same morning as the call. And then came the discovery that pulled my sister into the fire with her. Attached to one of the early emails to the venue, sent from that fraudulent account to smooth over a verification question, were photographs of my driver's license and my social security card. The license photo had been taken on a hallway table I recognized instantly, beside a vase from my sister's engagement dinner. The picture's hidden file data gave the detective the exact minute it was taken and the exact phone that took it. Madison's phone. My baby sister had photographed my identity documents at her own engagement party and texted them to our mother like a shopping list. While the investigation built in silence, I conducted a quieter demolition of my own, the financial kind, the kind I had been training for my entire career. I removed every family member from the phone plan I had been paying for 11 years, with 30 days of notice delivered by certified letter because accountants document everything. I stopped the monthly payments I had been making on Madison's car, payments totaling over $9,000 across 3 years, and within 2 months, that car went back to the lender on a tow truck. I closed the compromised card, froze my credit with all 3 bureaus, and reclaimed my documents from my mother's fireproof box, with a police escort standing in the doorway while she wept about ungrateful children. They had used me as a bank for a decade, so the bank failed, suddenly and completely, the way banks do. And then came the morning of Madison's grand engagement celebration. You should know that Silverleaf had legally voided the fraudulent transfer the moment the police confirmed the impersonation, which meant my June date was already mine again. But the December engagement party booking, paid for with my stolen card, simply evaporated when the charge was reversed as fraud. Eric, following both the law and, I suspect, his own sense of poetry, sent the cancellation notice to take effect that week. So on the morning of the celebration, while 200 invitations had long since promised the Whitmore family and their flown-in relatives an elegant evening in a vineyard barn, Madison and my mother arrived at Silverleaf to finalize details and were met at the gate by Eric, a printed fraud notice, and 2 sheriff's deputies who had been asked to keep the peace. There, on the gravel drive of the venue she stole from me in front of Grant and both of his horrified parents, my mother, Diane, was placed under arrest for felony identity theft, criminal impersonation, and fraudulent use of a credit card. The Whitmore family did not even wait for the gate to close. Grant's mother, a woman who had stared into her wineglass while my father burned me with gravy, finally found her voice, and she used it to declare, right there on the gravel, that no son of hers would marry into a family of criminals. The engagement was dissolved before lunch. The ring was requested back before dinner. And Madison, who had laughed about first come, first served, came first in only one thing that day. She was the first person my mother called from booking, and the call went to a phone plan that no longer existed. The legal reckoning unfolded over the following months, and I attended every single hearing, sitting in the front row with Nathan's hand in mine and my Nana, magnificent and furious, on my other side. My mother's attorney begged me to support leniency, to call it a misunderstanding between loved ones. The prosecutor asked me what I wanted. I told her that for 29 years my family had taught me that actions only have consequences when I am the one acting, and that I wanted the law to correct the record. My mother was convicted of felony identity theft and fraud. The judge, unmoved by her courtroom tears, noted that this was not one impulsive call, but a sustained scheme involving stolen documents, a forged identity, and thousands of dollars committed against her own daughter. She was sentenced to 30 months in state custody and full restitution. Madison pleaded guilty as an accomplice for harvesting and sharing my documents and received 3 years of supervised probation, a felony record that ended her marketing career within a month, and a restitution order of her own. And my father, whose violence had been photographed in burns and bruises and recorded in a medical chart the very night it happened, was convicted of assault in the 4th degree. He received probation, mandatory anger management, and a permanent criminal record, and the church where he had played the role of upstanding deacon for 20 years quietly removed him from every committee he had ever lorded over. I did not gloat. I want you to know that. I sat in that courtroom on sentencing day, watched my mother in a gray jumpsuit instead of a hostess apron, and felt no joy at all. What I felt was something better. I felt the weight of 18 silent dinner guests finally lifting off my chest. I felt 29 years of being the understudy ending, not with applause, but with a gavel. 7 months later, on the first Saturday of June, I walked down a grass aisle on a hillside in the Willamette Valley, on the exact stone terrace where I once stood alone at sunset and made a promise to a younger, lonelier version of myself. Eric upgraded everything and charged us nothing for the trouble, and he cried harder than anyone during the vows, which is saying something because my Nana wore waterproof mascara for a reason. The rows of white chairs were completely full. Colleagues who had covered for me during the hearings, friends who had driven me to urgent care and to courtrooms, Nathan's enormous, warm, ridiculous family who had folded me into their group chat like I had always been there. 200 seats, and not one of them held a person who had sat silent at that Thanksgiving table. As the sun went down over the vines and Nathan spun me across the terrace for our first dance, I finally understood the accounting of my own life. I had spent decades paying into a family that returned nothing, and the moment I closed that account, love flooded in from everywhere else, with interest. Blood is just biology. Family is behavior. My mother taught me that, though not in the way she intended, and it is the lesson I will someday pass to my own children, on a hillside that no one will ever take from me. But standing where I am today, I have to ask you, was I wrong to let my own mother go to prison over a wedding venue when I could have accepted an apology and a repayment plan? Or do you believe, like I do, that the venue was never the point, and the theft of my very name deserved every consequence it received? What would you have done if that folder slid across your Thanksgiving table? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story gave you strength, please subscribe and hit the bell icon, because tomorrow I will share another true story of justice that you will not believe.